Yep, got the code there, good. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to click continue. And this is the easy install feature. Now in the Mac, I can disable that with just a checkbox. Unfortunately, on the Windows version of VMware, I can't. So you have to watch that video to see the steps involved in how to turn that feature off. And click next. You have the choice of two different types of BIOS here. I'm just going to use the UEFI, so I'm really just accepting the defaults here. Because VMware recognises the operating system, it will configure the machine with the minimum required to run it successfully. So you can see that it's going to, by default, assign a maximum capacity of 60 gigabytes for the hard drive and 2 gigabytes of RAM. That's perfectly fine for the kind of things that we're doing with it, where we're just exploring the operating system and learning a bit more about it. Not so great, obviously, if you were going to use this in a production environment, because 60 gigabytes is really the minimum just for the operating system. So you would definitely bump that up if you expected to run databases on it or websites or something like that. And also, typically, you would give it more than the absolute minimum RAM. But for our purposes, the minimum specs are going to be okay. That'll let us do what we need to do. You can see the networking is currently set up as being shared with our Mac. That's also the default for the Windows VMware, so it will share with the Windows machine, and it will tell you it's using 2 cores and your CD drive and so on. You can customize those settings, and in the video on the VMware for Workstation, you'll be told how to do that. So you can watch that video later on to see. I'm going to just talk about one of those settings. So let me just save this and then show you the configuration. So this screen's a little bit different again to the Windows version, but the same content is in there. Just got a prettier interface basically, but it's all the same. So if we look in here and go to the network adapter, what I just want to briefly talk about is the options here. So by default, when you install a VMware virtual machine, it shares the IP address with the host computer, okay? So if I was to go and have a bit of a squiz at my Mac here and have a look at what IP address it's got, I can see it's 192.168.0.151. So that's going to be the shared IP address that it's going to use. And it's going to put all its traffic for the internet or through the network via my Mac to the rest of my network here at home. And that works fine for most circumstances. However, you may find it useful at times to use a bridged mode network. Okay, so I can go down here, for example, and say that I want it to be an Ethernet connection, and because I am actually using a Mac that's connected up to my network through an Ethernet cable, and I want it to have its own IP address. So as far as my network's concerned, I want it to be seen as a separate computer, just like it was a physical box that I just plonked on my desk right now and plugged into my network. So if I want that scenario, I have to change it from the shared one to the bridge mode. Now you'll notice it also has an auto detect feature, so it will try to be smart and find whatever available connections there are, whether they be Ethernet or Wi-Fi and so on, or a personal area network and Bluetooth. Generally speaking, I recommend that you actually specifically set the type of connection that you want. So in my case, I'm using Ethernet because I've got this Mac directly connected to my networks via cable. Over the side here, it'll give you some information about what it thinks the IP address range is going to be, subnet mask and things like that. And that's all reflective of my local network, and that's okay. That's what I would expect it to be, so that's fine. Now, on your computers at home, you're probably going to be running them on their own, so you're not going to have a network attached to it for your exercises. You just got the box we gave you. So in that case, you're not going to see any information there about an IP. Similarly, the share with Windows feature is not much good to you because you're not actually connected to the internet. But I just thought I'd make you aware that if you were setting this up on a real network and you're going to use it as a virtual environment, a virtualized server, then typically you would turn it to bridge mode and you would give it and assign its own IP address. By default, you'll get its IP address off a DHCP server if one exists. That's the server that assigns IP addresses for your network if you've got one. And a bit later on, when we come to customizing our server, we'll revisit that concept a little bit more about what we should do. But for now, that's all the changes I'm going to do. I've just changed it to bridged. I'm going to close that, and I'm ready now to start the installation process. So I'm going to fire up the virtual machine, which is then going to go through the boot process. I need to remember to press the key at the beginning there to boot up the ISO. And now we're in the standard Windows Server / Windows 10 installation phase that I'm no doubt some of you are quite familiar with. So Jess asks, can you put a virtual machine in a virtual machine? Yes, you can, and I've done it a few times. The best I've seen in the industry is a virtual machine that was virtualized 3 times. So it was in 3 different layers. All right, so we're going to use US for language. We're going to select English Australia for our location. So we're going to find that. And there we go. We're going to leave the keyboard on US. That's what we use in Australia because we've got the $sign. We'll go ahead and install it. This is for those of you wondering, this is an i9 processor with 32 gig of RAM, so I think our virtual should work okay. Now, this is what I was saying before about this ISO. This ISO doesn't just show you one version of Windows Server. It has some choices to make, and it is important you pick the right one here. So those of you that are very quick to just accept the defaults, please note that if you install the default version, which is the 2016 standard, you will not have a graphical user interface. It will expect you to do everything from the command prompt, which you can do, but we're not Insert 3 showing you how to do it that way. So we actually want to choose the second option, which is the standard version, but with the desktop experience. Okay, so you'll need to make sure you select that when you go to do the install. You'll also see it has a data center version as well, which is essentially where the server's been optimized to work in a basically a suite of servers all doing different tasks. So we're going to choose this one, the standard evaluation. This is the one that most of your smaller businesses would be using and supporting anyway. We'll click next. We'll accept license terms, obviously. Next. And then we've got 2 options. We can do an upgrade or a custom. So I'm going to do a custom because this is a new install. You can see that it recognises that it has 60 gigabytes of available space. Now that available space isn't actually allocated on your hard drive straight away. It's actually only used as and when the virtual environment needs it. So you may find that when you finish this process that your virtual is only consuming 20 odd gigabytes of storage space on your real computer. But if your virtual environment needs to expand to accommodate more files and things, it will go up to a maximum size of 60. So that's what it thinks its hard drive is. So I'll click next. And it's going to start the installation routine, which is almost identical to what we would do with Windows 10 workstation or client. So this part's very similar. If you recall from first term, one of the things that we often do with servers is we put them onto a much higher grade hardware platform than we do for workstations. So when you're actually buying a server spec machine from a first tier vendor, typically that machine has been through a quality process and a testing process with Microsoft to ensure that the software and the drivers work reliably with the actual software, because servers crashing is a really bad thing. And so you will find that the similarly spec'd, even for a small business, a similarly spec'd Windows Server box is going to cost you quite a bit more than the equivalent workstation, or one that you could build yourself if you sat there on PC case gear or something and inspected it out yourself. And part of the reason why is because they go through that testing process, and they're actually basically warranted by Dell or whoever it might be to be a server spec machine with server spec components that are designed to be more reliable than perhaps something you could put together for your gaming rig, where if it crashes it's inconvenient, but it's not going to cost you money. Okay, so we're just going through, so installing the updates. You can see it's quite quick. Normally the installing on a virtual machine is a bit quicker than it will be in real life. You may not experience that, unfortunately, with the machines we've given you, because they're a bit old generation, so this process might be a little bit more long-winded, but you'll still get there. And these steps we're going through at the moment are identical to what you would experience on your VMware workstation for Windows. Okay, so we're going to restart it now. So I'll just fast forward that a bit, let it go. Now at this point we haven't installed VMware Tools, which is something we're going to do. So I'm not going to try maximizing the screen just yet because it doesn't really know how to interact with the Retina display I've got here, which is quite a high resolution display. Just trying to remember what resolution it is. It's something ridiculous. Yeah, so the default resolution of this display we're watching at the moment is 5120 by 2880. So Windows is going to struggle a bit with that until we actually have the right drivers installed. So for now, I'm going to leave this as a window on the desktop until we've got the VMware Tools installed. VMware Tools also give you some extra features when it comes to things like suspending the virtual and other things. Okay, so you can see by default there is one user, which is administrator, and we need to apply a password for that. Since it's a testing environment, we're just going to use password 1 so we don't forget it later. Nothing worse than if you've forgotten what the passwords are on your test boxes. Okay, so there we've got our GUI, very similar to Windows 10. So we'll go ahead and unlock it, and I'm going to use the, for now, I'm going to send the keys to it. There we go. And we'll see our first look at the machine. So we'll say, yes, it's okay, it's down the network. And by default, it's going to start up an application that allows us to manage this and other servers. Okay, so there's our dashboard. Now, VMware Workstation tools should have been installed, but I didn't see them come up. So let's go ahead and install them. Now, if they don't install automatically, you can do this on the Windows machine as well. You'll have an option under your virtual machine to install the VMware tools. So I'm going to immediately do that before we go too far, because that'll allow me then to go full screen and you can see the screen a bit better. Okay, so it's actually mounted a DVD drive, which is the VMware tools. We're going to go ahead and run the configuration. We'll set up file for that, I should say. And I'm doing all this before I actually start playing with the configuration of server as well, because it's going to have to reboot after this. All right, so it's copying the drivers, which will include a graphic driver so it can work better with your video card. You see that it's trying to work things out. I'll need to reboot it before it comes good. So we'll say yes. And we'll let it